Cultural domains, pile sorting, and ranking. In this presentation, I will discuss three other types of quantitative ethnobotany. Cultural domains, pile sorting, and ranking. On this image, you see already a sort of pile sorting exercise, and it can be very simple if you want to have a group discussion in which you want to discuss certain things that belong to certain categories. In this card set on the control of malaria, they have apparently made certain cards with issues with regard to malaria, mosquitoes, ugly drinking water, dead cattle, mosquito nets, and so on. And they have discussed in a group of people what were the good practices, what were the bad practices, and what practices or issues were not relevant. So you see that people have put the ordinary housefly in the not relevant section, the good practices, the mosquito net, and the bad practices is letting yourself bite by mosquitoes or having a barrel of water that is unprotected. In this way, you can very simply discuss things visually with a group, and we'll talk about that in this presentation. But first about cultural domains. What is a cultural domain? Well, each culture has its own categories in order to order their experiences. For example, what is a disease? What makes a disease a disease? Some cultures have diseases like the evil eye that we in the Netherlands do not recognize. So that disease does not form part of our domain of disease. But apparently illnesses and diseases are different in every culture. So if you ask people questions about medicinal plants used for disease, you have to make sure you understand their cultural domain of disease. What makes things sacred? Why is a plant magic? Those are things that you can ask people, but you have to make sure beforehand you understand the cultural domain where your questions belong to. So cultural domain analysis helps to understand how people in a society think and define their world. And uncovering local knowledge helps to explain patterns of behavior. And this local knowledge has to do with the cultural domain. For example, in health-seeking behavior, why do persons go to traditional healers? Why do persons go to hospitals? Why do people self-medicate with medicinal plants? And in the management of natural resources, the forest, what does it mean for people? If you want to know why they do not manage it or why they manage it in a certain way, you have to know first how do people perceive forest. Do they see it as something evil with dangerous animals? Do they see it as something beautiful? You have to know that in order to discuss the management of this natural resource with them. Analyzing a cultural domain. Let's say you want to do research on plants that are involved in taboos. Sometimes people pick a plant, but they first have to pay some coins before they can harvest the leaves. Or some plants are not allowed to be touched at all. Some trees are sacred that may never be cut down, and you want to find out what is it behind these taboo plants. So the first step is what you can do, of the steps that you can take to analyze this issue, this cultural domain of taboo plants, is identify the components of a cultural domain. What do people mean with taboo plants? So these are questions, interviews that you can conduct. Ask people, what do you mean by a taboo plant? So people will free list, they will tell things out of the top of their head. What are taboo plants? Who has taboo plants? Where do they grow? And you can identify some of these issues or some of the plants. You can also discover how people classified these components. So there are taboo plants that have to do with gender. Women cannot touch the plant. For men, it's no problem. This plant can never be given to your nephew. These plants belong to Catholicism. These plants belong to the Islam, and these plants belong to traditional African gods. These plants give you social status or not. These vegetables are only eaten by poor people. So you can you can do exercise with people to find out what are the categories in which people divide these plants. And triads is one that's described in the course book, but pile sorts is something that we're gonna discuss during this lecture. Then you make different piles on which you place the different items. So let's say you have 100 vegetables and you want to discuss which vegetables have a high social status and which vegetables are actually only eaten by poor people. So if you have 100 cards with pictures of vegetables, people can divide all these vegetables in different piles. So then you can, and then they can discuss it, because maybe not everybody agrees, but then you know, okay, these vegetables are seen as poor people food. And that's very important if you want, for example, to stimulate the consumption of these vegetables. You also want to identify the rules for their arrangements. Why do people place certain plants or issues in a certain pile? And if they're all in that pile, are there some issues that are even worse than others, so that you can give them a ranking? For example, the worst vegetable or the most bitter tree bark. And you can put that one on top. And explore the associated value. Okay, the most bitter plant, is it 2 times as bitter or 3 times as bitter as the follow-up plant? Or the vegetable that is most associated with poor people, is it worse? And how much worse is it than the second runner-up? And then you can give extra weight to the ranking and you do an exercise of weight ranking. You also want to know if everybody in your community agrees. Is it true that these type of vegetables are associated with poor people? If you do a consensus analysis, you compare the pile sorting, or you compare the values given to that vegetables among many people. Does everybody agree that this is poor people food? Or do the poor people say, no, this is rich people food, or we never eat it, so why is it associated with poverty? And you can also explain the variability in the group by factor analysis, something that we will not discuss today. Let's first start with freelisting. Freelisting can be used in the course of an interview to elicit items of a category or domain. People then name the words that come to their mind when they think of a concept. For example, what is your favorite color? Or how many vegetables do you eat during the week? Or can you name 6 medicinal plants? Or what is your favorite Hollywood actor? Freelisting is used by research to check whether a domain is salient or locally meaningful. It can be used to determine consensus, see if everybody thinks the same. And freelisting of medicinal plants, so asking people to freelist medicinal plants, can be used to understand the health concepts specific of that group. So on this slide, you see the difference between freelisting and open-ended questions. If you freelist somebody, you ask somebody, what does this person know about a certain domain? For example, what kind of vegetables exist? What illnesses exist? Then you learn about the domain. You develop a list of names of illnesses, but you also understand, if you ask this to plenty of people, what these people consider an illness. If they never mention cancer, for example, it could be that they don't know cancer is an illness, or they name it differently, or cancer doesn't exist in their community. In an open-ended survey, an open question, you ask, personal question, what illnesses have you had? So then you get a completely different answer. And then you learn about the respondent, him or herself. You get a patient history. So you have to think about beforehand, what is the question? What do you want to know? And then decide what kind of method do you use in order to get that data. Pile sorts are used to understand local classification systems. And they can be done as a group exercise to assess consensus. So people are asked to make piles with drawings or photographs of maybe living plants or plant samples, other items that are previously collected. maybe in a free listing exercise. So let's say we want to know the most popular vegetable in Wageningen, and beforehand we ask students to list the vegetables they know, and we collect pictures or the real vegetables, and then later we ask the students to pile them into very nice vegetables, mediocre vegetables, and ugly vegetables, and ask them to make piles. And then after the pile sorting, the people need to explain why they grouped the piles in a certain way, why they considered one vegetable to be ugly and very nice. So you can also use pile sorting by studying how market sellers arrange herbs and spices on the stall. It can help you to understand the dietary choices or the local beliefs. Which foods are piled together? Does that mean something? Which food cannot be cooked or eaten together? Maybe they're put apart on the market stalls. Or which plants are considered magic? Maybe they're piled up at one specific corner of your medicinal plant market stalls. For example, you can use pile sorting with group discussions on COVID-19. Which activities help to spread the virus? Which activities prevent the virus outbreak? And which uses or practices are not relevant? If you watch the news a little bit, this is very relevant, and there are group discussions, and it's not mentioned as being pile sorts, but these shifting in activities that may help or may not help to spread the virus are discussed every day in the media. If you have asked people to free list or to mention all the trees, herbs, leaves, barks, medicine, or canopy, forest, whatever they know, then you get a matrix. So for every informant on the left column, you get numbers. I know 12 species of tulips and 11 species of bamboo, says informant 1. And so you go on. And there are also informants that do not know any tree or any type of seed. So this is the matrix that you use, and then you start using computer programs to provide visual images. In this video tube, you can see a very simple exercise on pile sorting in the field in the community in Africa. It's very illustrative, so I would suggest you watch this video. When you have collected a lot of data on pre-listing and ranking and weight ranking, there are several computer programs that can do your analysis once you have sorted your data in a matrix with zeros and ones and other numbers. I won't go into detail on this. SPSS, the statistical program, is often used. So what you can do then afterwards, if you have asked lots of people lots of questions, in this case about animals, then you can let the computer do the pile sorting. In this case, the interviewer has asked the respondents to list all kinds of animals and also their opinion about these animals. Is it a positive relationship? Does the animal have a positive relationship with humans, or do people hate the animal? Is it edible or is it not edible? Is it living in a tropical forest or in the village? Has it 4 legs or whatever? So then people pile sort, and different people pile sort in a different way, but here is the consensus calculated. So you see that the more you go to the left, the more positive the people think about these animals. The more you go to the right, the more negative people think about these animals. And there you see different groups of animals. And some animals are also in between. So let's say half of the people think a fish is a positive, I think fish is a positive animal, and the other half of the people probably have said the fish is not a positive animal. I'm afraid of fishes. So you see how people judge animals, and you see also that if you go to the right, the inedible, harmful, and not appreciate animals are also animals that you think, oh, yak, snakes, scorpions, flea, spider, ticks. And on the left, you see animals that you may like deer, rabbit, donkeys, turtles. So this is what a computer can do for you if you have a lot of free listing and pile sorting data.